I got to sit on this for a couple days, and the longer I sat on it, the more it seeped into my soul.
12 hours of work and I still can't sleep. They don't end.
I really want to. I got some bad ideas in my head.
It's showtime.
Tig,
Eric,
this is the first time that you watched it, right?
this is the first time.
All right, so let's talk about Taxi Driver. Landmark picture that somehow manages to straddle the line between being a mainstream classic of cinema as well as a cult classic. 1976 Taxi Driver, starring Robert De Niro, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Paul Schrader, which is an important point because this is really his movie in a lot of ways.
Unfortunately, the movie's so iconic that I knew things obviously about the movie,
Well, sure, that's unavoidable.
but I did not know how it ended. So that was great. Also want to say that we usually, we do the whole 24-hour thing, but I got to sit on this for a couple days, and the longer I sat on it, the more it seeped into my soul. It's one of those movies that everybody has done since then. So they get picked apart by everybody else along the way for decades.
It was certainly very, very controversial in its day. There were a couple of films prior to Taxi Driver that tackled this kind of character. Certainly nothing on this level of darkness and with this degree of nihilism.
Do you want me to call a manager?
Oh, you don't have to call the manager. I mean, I'm just asking.
Troy!
All right, okay. I'm just.
Because I think that's kind of one of the striking aspects of this picture is that it's incredibly nihilistic.
We call him Doughboy because he'll do anything for a buck. So how's it hanging? What's that?
Travis Bickle isn't just an isolated and angry man. He doesn't have a clear worldview. It's not actually very clear what it is that he's angry about, what it is that he's lashing about. He's just wrecked in the head.
Yeah, and he's not a hero. He's not.
No.
And
No, and just to not to stop you there, but I do want to clarify, this is purely a gag. It is not meant to celebrate Travis Bickle because Travis Bickle's a scumbag.
I really want to. I got some bad ideas in my head.
I do not endorse the idea of thinking that Travis Bickle is like some Joker type hero to be worshipped. Absolutely not.
Which two things that was one of the things I wanted to say is, one, I didn't see the Joker, but I'm guessing that the Joker movie takes things from it.
It lifts a good deal tonally and story-wise from this, as well as another Scorsese picture, The King of Comedy.
Okay.
Yes.
So we both grew up with New York City in our blood. Where we grew up, so we've been in the city, New York City, enough times and spent enough time in it. So to the point where when I'm watching this, I could like smell it. I could feel everything about New York City because of being there and going in the 80s and the 90s, early 90s, when Times Square was a shithole and everything was, falling apart.
Absolutely. This is this movie came at a time when New York City was on this terrible downturn. Crime was spiking and there were garbage strikes, and the city was just a filthy dump. And it accurately reflects what New York City was during that time. It was an absolute shithole. The city's not like that at all anymore. Times Square is beautiful. This film did such a good job of capturing the mood, the air, the taste in the air, the smell of the city from that era, that I think the view of New York lingered for like a decade after even the city had been changed and became what it is today.
So I was disappointed with the ending. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't watched it. He should have died. The ending makes it come off like he's kind of a hero.
No, it doesn't, I think. And they get this point across in a wonderfully slightly subtle twist through the soundtrack. People haven't seen the film near the end. Travis Bickle, the Robert De Niro character, heads into the apartment where a pimp lives, and he shoots the place up, and he shoots a bunch of people up, kills the pimp, and he gets shot up as well. He tries to take his own life, but he's out of bullets. Afterwards, the press spins it as, or the press believes that he went in there to save this 14-year-old prostitute. Or 12, actually,
12-year-old.
12, yeah, it's this 12-year-old prostitute, which he did, except that's really simplifying what he was doing, because it wasn't about saving her. It was about this whole twisted psychology. But in the press, he's hailed as a hero for having saved this 12-year-old prostitute. So in the end, he picks up Cybill Shepherd's character, Betsy, who he kind of was infatuated with earlier in the picture. And she's kind of congratulating him on what he did. No, he did such a good thing and so on. But there's this slight moment at the very end where they're sort of driving along and she's talking very nicely about what he went on to do. He looks up in the rearview mirror and there's this sort of wild light in his eyes. The soundtrack, the score, Bernard Herrmann's last score, incidentally, one of the great all-time composers. This is the last one he did before he died. There's this sudden reverse saxophone note that suggests to you, oh, he's still twisted in the head. And so the movie's kind of telling you at the very end, he wasn't a hero. There's still a monster lurking inside this guy and just waiting for another opportunity to come out. Because of course, throughout the whole movie, he's looking for an excuse to do what he did.
I mean, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know either.
You know, in the beginning, you don't really know. I mean, until he starts sitting outside the campaign headquarters, kind of watching Cybill Shepherd.
What taxi driver?
That one, the one that's sitting there.
How long has he been there?
I don't know.
And then he goes in there and it's real creepy how he hits on her. But for some reason, Cybill is attracted to him, or at least going to give him a shot.
Yeah, she's intrigued by him.
Right. Until he brings her to a porno in Times Square on a date and is confused by why that's weird.
Movie that a lot of couples come to. All kinds of couples go here.
Sure about that?
He's not just awkward. He literally doesn't even understand.
When he first hits on Cybill Shepherd, he's very manipulative.
I think you're a lonely person. I drive by this place a lot, and I see you here.
And you can see through his language and the things that he's saying, he's trying to separate her from the other people around her. All these people are against you, and you don't belong among these people, and so on. I think that's what he's subconsciously attempting to do, taking her to the porno theater, is to isolate her from society in the same way that he's isolated from society, and to kind of drag her into his world. He has to degrade her in order to make her the kind of lesser person that he feels inside as well.
Loneliness has followed me my whole life, everywhere.
He's not thinking it through. This is just sort of an instinct for him.
Right. He does it with Jodie Foster's character exactly the same way. He handles her the same way. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you doing that? Why are you hanging out with these? Even though he's justifiably right with Jodie Foster's character.
Well, that's all right. I'm going to get you out of here.
So we better make it or Sport will get mad.
I don't want to make it. Who's Sport?
His approach with Iris is basically the same as Sport's approach with Iris. You know, telling her that she's special and only he can protect her. And, it's us. It's a sort of, it's us against the world, baby kind of thing.
Right.
Baby, I never wanted you to like what you're doing. If you ever liked what you were doing, you wouldn't be my woman.
Which, obviously is super creepy coming from Sport, because he's a pimp and he has that whole dance dialogue with her that's just really just oozes creep. But Travis Bickle does the same thing. He thinks he's different. He thinks he's going to rescue her, but he's effectively doing the same thing.
When I first watched it and I sat on it for a day, at first you're like, oh, he's just another victim of the city. He's a country guy. He's just driving a taxi. He's in Vietnam, whatever. And he comes there and it's just another person who got twisted and chewed up and spit out by the city. And now he's broken. When you think about it, you realize, no, he was just a broken person who came to the city.
Yeah. And there are clues through his monologues. He expresses that he's frustrated with the city. There are so many crummy people around, criminals, and the city's dirty. And that's where his frustration comes from. It's just that, the city's awful.
All the animals come out at night. Whores, skunk pussies, buggers, queens, fairies, dopers, junkies, sick, venal. Someday a real rain will come and wash all this scum off the streets. But
you get all these clues throughout that he's kind of lying to himself. There's his connection with his family. His parents are out there somewhere. He's writing them, but he is purposely keeping himself separated from them. Before they're going into the porno theater, he very proudly tells Betsy, like, I'm not into music and I'm not into movies and I'm not into things that are like the things that other people are into. He's not into like
he's not in
popular
anything.
Well, I don't follow music too much, but I would really like to. I really would. But I was thinking maybe, you could listen to it on your record player.
There's politics, right? Palantine, the candidate, gets in the cab with him at one point, and he rants and raves about, here's what you need to do to fix the city. But Bickle doesn't actually have any beliefs of his own. He says outright that he's not into politics.
Well, I don't know. I don't follow political issues that closely, sir. I don't know.
And that's clear throughout the picture. He doesn't have a belief system. He's just an angry, frustrated guy. His isolation hasn't been forced on him. This is self-imposed isolation on his part. I feel like there's almost a part of him that enjoys wallowing in the misery that he's surrounded himself with.
We all know those kind of people.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing.
Where are they now?
So was this a book beforehand, or was this just a screenplay written by somebody?
No, this is a screenplay by Paul Schrader, who's a great screenwriter. He's written a number of films over the years. He wrote it during a time when he was in the throes of alcoholism and addiction. This was just him just like pouring out his inner self. He doesn't say that proudly, but even Scorsese himself says that over the years he wishes that Paul Schrader had gotten more of his due for this movie, because Scorsese says, and this is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close to an exact quote, this is really Paul Schrader's movie. Scorsese himself, of course, is in it. Yeah,
he's in the taxi. He's in that. That's such a heartbreaking scene.
Like that speech in particular, with Scorsese in the back of the taxi. He's an upset husband whose wife is cheating on him in an apartment upstairs. And just the stuff that he says, it's real difficult stuff to listen to.
I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her with a 44 Magnum pistol. Did you ever see what a 44 Magnum pistol would do to a woman's face? I mean, it would fucking destroy it.
After watching it, you kind of feel like you need a shower. Like when he decides to go after Palantine, why is he doing it?
It makes no sense at all for why he would. The only reason I could even think of is it was some way of lashing out at Cybill.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was just him. He's looking for an excuse to make a statement and for it to be a violent statement. He wants a reason, and he wants a reason that he could also justify him to himself, because he's lying to himself throughout all this. That's what the whole Iris thing was all about. He's not actually concerned for this young girl.
You're a young girl. You should be at home now. You should be dressed up. You should be going out with boys. You should be going to school. That kind of stuff.
You could pick him up and put his character in any town, in a rich neighborhood, fancy neighborhood where there's no crime, and his dialogue would be the same. Look at this corrupt town, followed by, all working off money and nobody cares and everybody's fake. It's like you can hear all the dialogue that he would be saying. It would be the same.
I agree. I agree 100%. And in that same situation, he would look for a reason to lash out.
I'm trying you.
I mean, this guy is, he's a mass shooter. Now, in this movie, he happened to shoot some dirtbags who arguably deserved it, quote unquote, deserved it.
But that doesn't change what he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And then you get to that climactic scene, just this orgy of blood where he's shooting fingers off, and there's all these murders. And then the most harrowing part is the police arriving, and he's there and he's bloodied, holding his wounds, and it's like, oh man, like it's just
That was probably my favorite shot, the overhead shot. That was such an awesome shot.
Cost them a lot of money to do, and they basically had to wreck an abandoned apartment building.
I would imagine.
You look at that shot and you're like, well, how did they pull that off? It wasn't a set. They actually filmed that in an old apartment, and sure enough, they had to chop the ceiling out and create this track in the ceiling in order to get that shot. It's magnificent.
That's what I assumed. Like, it must have been because, with the equipment they had then, they didn't have small stuff. So they had to probably chop the tops of the doorways out and everything.
Yeah.
When they were going through the doorways. Yeah, you can hear, you hear everything going on as it's panning away from the room and everything, and the crying and...
Yeah, and I thought those were all really important details too, like the crying and the misery involved in what he did, despite the fact that there are people who kind of glorify Travis Bickle and look at him as sort of a counterculture hero. The movie is making very clear, no, this was a massacre, and not this violence resulted in misery. This violence did not result in good things, even if sport was a pimp and so on. This is horrible. All these lives just got wrecked.
You can't even assume that Iris, just because she got out of that situation and she went home, doesn't mean that you fixed her.
No, certainly not. If anything, who's to say to what extent that he traumatized her even further? One of the things that makes this movie so potent is that it's such a rich character study of this very specific kind of person, this kind of angry, isolated guy who just stews in his own bile. And I think a lot of that is just his own internalized self-loathing that he's, again, like sort of projecting out. If people want a little more in-depth discussion on Taxi Driver, it's actually the longest chapter in my book, The Films of Martin Scorsese, Gangsters, Greed, and Guilt, where I spent a lot of time dissecting Travis Bickle's character and so on and so forth. So check it out. It's available in hardcover and digital on book sites all over the place and bookstores and, all that stuff.
So this week, Eric, we have a special guest that will be on to discuss this movie that me and that special guest discussed to give you from the 1980s, Flight of the Navigator.
What time did you enter the woods?
Around 8 o'clock.
Then what happened?
I have been sent from Phaelon to borrow samples of life from different galaxies for study. On this planet, I chose you.
Flight of the Navigator.
You come back here, we talk about navigating flight. Leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think of the crazy Mohawk guy who kills people in the city.
And we will pick one winner from the comments who will win a yellow cab and license in New York City. You will be a cab driver in Manhattan.
You get a
Congratulations. Yep.
Go to Patreon at Nerd Out with me. Thanks for hanging out at the movie club.